Hi friends, Sam here. So I thought I'd just talk a little bit about tourniquet science because I've been, thinking about this stuff for 20 something years, and a lot of people lately have been asking me questions. I'm not an expert. Just spoiler alert. I'm just a guy, kind of a hack who likes building things and doing deep dives. And so I thought I would tell you my perspective on articles that I've seen through the years. There's hundreds of articles. There's so much data out there that it's really hard to separate the wheat from the chaff. But I separate into categories. So in my mind, there's human, animal, and model. Those are three very broad categories. And under the human group, the articles that I see are either bleeding or not bleeding. And then within that bleeding group, if they're bleeding, it's probably a retrospective article. It's very hard to do a prospective study on bleeding people. So people will look at trauma registries, see how many people came in with tourniquets on, and then try to analyze that. I don't love that type of study because there's selection bias. If you put a tourniquet on wrong and somebody bleeds out in the field and they die there, they don't make it into a lot of these retrospective studies. I'm not sure how often that happens, but I know it happens. And so that's one type of study to be looking at. Another is the not bleeding group. So essentially you have volunteers, and that's suboptimal too. You have, it's a controlled room. They are in a nice ventilated place. Nobody's screaming, well lit. So doing volunteer-based tourniquet studies may not be perfect either. Also under the volunteer group, what are the different tools that were used? I think Doppler ultrasound probably is the best that's out there right now. You get visual and auditory feedback there, confirmation that you have arterial occlusion or not. Sometimes you'll see people using fetal Doppler devices that just gives auditory feedback. Pulse oximeters, palpation, those types of analyses I don't think are great. I did my own homebrew test a few years ago. I put an arterial line into my arm just to see if my wraps could stop flow in my arm. They could, but what I learned more from that was the nature of venous tourniquets. And I'll also say this, I don't really care about arm studies. It's legs, that's what's most interesting. It's a little bit like putting a bunch of Olympic skiers on a bunny hill. Every tourniquet should be able to stop flow in pretty much every arm. It's a low bar. It's the legs where it gets a lot harder. So under the human group, there's also living and dead. So studies that focus on cadavers, you kind of have to split those apart between recently deceased versus not recently deceased. But I've seen articles studying cadavers where I don't love those either, because either the limbs were very thin or, it just, to me, it's not an accurate representation of living tissue. And something that I'm very interested in is ability of tourniquets to maintain pressure over time. Whenever you put a tourniquet on, fluids move out of the way, pressures decrease right away, and at some point you have lost arterial occlusion and you're making people worse. So I would like to see a study showing how long tourniquets can maintain pressure on volunteers, but that's a hard study too, because you put people at risk for excess pain and DVTs and deep tissue injury, so that's not easy. So those are sort of the human studies that are out there. There's animal studies too, but I'm not sure which animal represents legs best, but I think you can use animal studies for hemostatic agents. That's intriguing to me, but for tourniquets, I can't think of a great model there. And then there are non-living models. And the first that comes to mind is a product called the HapMed Trainer. This is an enigma to me. The HapMed Trainer has been used in many different tourniquet articles, but if you look up HapMed Trainer on YouTube, I think it has 18 subscribers in one video. If you go to the website, I can't buy one right now. I've used one once. The numbers seem to be all over the map. I can come up with an article that shows the cat tourniquet having a pressure in the 200s, another article showing it in the 300s, another article in the 400s. So maybe someone here has some insights regarding the HapMed Trainer. I just don't know. Other articles, and probably most common you'll see, are pneumatic bladders applied next to limbs, and then tourniquets wrapped around bladder plus limb, or bladder adjacent to like a rigid cylinder, a Nalgene bottle or something like that. And those are compelling, except for the fact that the pressure on the surface is going to be different than the pressure on the inside. And In a fluid, in a bag of water, that isn't the case. But in a jelly-like substance, like my leg, which has a lot of different tissues, I'm convinced that the deeper arteries close off after the more superficial arteries. So what do you do with that? I'm not really sure. I did a study comparing elastic versus inelastic tourniquets using a bag of saline. Saline, a bag of saline is not a leg, but to me it's compelling, just showing that elastic maintains pressure better than inelastic. And then some people will toy around with other types of trainers, the task trainers and pool noodles and that sort of thing. And back to the HapMed trainer, I think the HapMed trainer was meant to be a training device, but because there don't seem to be real tourniquet testing devices out there, people were like, wow, this is great. It shows your pressure. So it turned into a good number of articles. Maybe that's true, or maybe that's not. Don't know. So my mind right now is on how best to make a tourniquet testing device that is low cost and reproducible by other people. I'm kind of in a deep rabbit hole on that right now. So we'll see where this leads, but just circling back, I'm just a dude that likes building things. I am not an expert. I do not have a budget, a lab. I just have my shop and a 3D printer, and I like making stuff. So your input is always welcome, and that's all. Again, so I slipped on that previous clip and thought I'd add a little bit more about the most important article related to tourniquets. This is the 2019 recommended limb tourniquets in tactical combat casualty care. That article probably has shaped how we think about tourniquets more than any other that I'm aware of. And I think it's shaped our perspectives globally even. I could be wrong about this, maybe there are others, but this was a meta-analysis in 2019 where COTC, the Committee on Tactical Combat Casualty Care, did a lot of heavy lifting. They read a ton of articles. They created a chart. This may be the most important chart in all of tourniquet literature as well. And it has 8 different rating columns that they created. I'll read them off for you here. So one of them is occlusion, time, simplicity, pressure, specification, safety, usage, and logistics. I could split hairs on each of these columns, but I'm not going to do that right now. COTC is a U.S. military organization, and their goal is to keep U.S. soldiers alive. All of the tourniquets that they have recommended are made in the USA because it makes sense to keep your production in the USA. That is logical. If you're in Ukraine, you should be testing and making your own tourniquets. That just makes sense too. Unfortunately, people have viewed this article as these are the best tourniquets in the world, and this makes sense for everybody. Civilian, big, small, cats, dogs, whatever it is. And I think that's a overreach. I'm most interested, frankly, as a dad, a civilian dad, in how my kids are doing in school. The things that this article does not include, I made a list here. So this is a one-handed application, so they don't cover that in the article. One-fingered application. So if you have impaired dexterity, which tourniquet is easiest to use? That's not covered. Entrapped limb use, not covered. Pressure maintenance over time. So this is a bigger and bigger topic because people are putting tourniquets on and leaving them on for a long time. And I know that when tourniquets get applied, the pressure drops immediately. And I'm quite certain that if you've had a tourniquet on for 6 hours, you've lost arterial occlusion. And probably when you come to an ER, you're going to have pulses. That tourniquet is doing you no favors. Which one is best for pediatrics? Which is best for canines? Which is best for obese limbs? There's an ANSI criteria, I forget ANSI, American National Standards Institute. Those tourniquets are supposed to encircle 31-inch limbs. I think it's wishful. Frankly, I don't think any tourniquet will reliably stop flow in a limb that's that big. How about the elderly? So sometimes you have patients who, they may have small limbs, but their pipes are calcified. That's lead pipe physiology. No tourniquet will stop flow in those kinds of limbs. What's best for them? That's not considered in the review. Durability. So with my wraps, you can put a lot of holes in them and they will still work for giving direct pressure. As tourniquets, I wouldn't do that. Pain and tissue damage. So these are 2 categories I think are really important, but folks gloss over them all the time. Regularly, I hear people say, it's a tourniquet, it's going to hurt, and I consider that a cop-out. I'm in medicine to help save lives and also take the edge off, limit pain, limit suffering. So if there's a way to do life-saving with less pain, I'm going to choose that path. tourniquet runway. I may have made that up, I'm not sure, but I think it's an important consideration. That's how far will the crank mechanism crank. Ease of conversion. So some tourniquets are a lot easier to remove than others. That's not talked about in the article. MSRP, so the price. The prices of tourniquets are all over the place. The article focuses on GSA, so government pricing. That's irrelevant to me as a civilian, just wondering which one is the best for me. And then one of the biggest things for me is multi-utility. So I want products that I can do 5, 10, 20 different things with. Multi-utility is very important to me anyway. And then of course that article does not include anything that was invented after 2019. So my point is, keep your brain open for new things. I don't think that Kotze is writing a new review anytime soon. Kotze's article was a meta-analysis. They're not a testing lab. And the world right now, I think, is lacking reliable ways to test tourniquets. So that's an area that I'd like to dig into some more. So hopefully it's mildly interesting. All right, bye.